Tropic Thunder's gun mistakes were completely accurate by accident. Tropic Thunder is a war movie about actors in a war movie who actually end up in an actual war zone. The guns are wrong, but they're also kind of right. The tactics are usually worse, except for when they're surprisingly realistic, but somehow it's all kind of perfect. This movie permanently etched itself into the deepest corners of the internet and made its name as a classic as soon as it came out. Ever since then, a countless number of theories came out about the weaponry and the tactics seen on the big screen. For comedy, it's surprisingly accurate, but there are, at the same time, a few inconsistencies that you wouldn't expect. Is it all on purpose? Can mistakes also tell stories? Time to find out. For those of you who haven't seen this absolute classic, or perhaps just need a refresher course, Tropic Thunder is a movie about an eccentric film cast that goes above and beyond to bring a Vietnam War movie to life. Each character is a satirical but eerily realistic representation of various real-life stereotypes in Hollywood. The over-the-top method actor whose behavior is legitimately bordering on insanity, the washed-out action movie star trying to deliver real emotion for once in his life, the drug addict starring in cheap, low-end comedies, the rapper looking for ventures other than music, and of course, the unknown actor who actually cares and wants to prove himself. Despite their different personalities, they all share the same flaw. Every single one of them is a spoiled, selfish Hollywood brat, incapable of devoting themselves to the project. To force the message out of them, the inexperienced director decides to go native, taking them into the wilderness of Southeast Asia, where they'll be filmed by hidden cameras as they learn to fend for themselves and hopefully deliver something that can actually be used in the film. The mission, however, goes sideways immediately. The cast touches down on drug lord territory. The director is immediately killed by almost a century-old mine, but since the cast is expecting a high level of immersion, they fail to realize they're not on an improvised movie set, but in real danger. This is a production of a fake war movie that the cast itself thinks is real. And even though you wouldn't expect it from a movie wrapped up in satirical comments, obsessed with mocking Hollywood tropes, the weapons are actually more accurate than the weapons in some serious war movie productions.
I'm a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude.
The most famous line from this movie, and arguably one of the most iconic lines in comedic history, actually summarizes the movie very well. We're going to be talking about actors who are pretending to be different actors, who are pretending to be Special Forces members on a borderline suicide rescue mission deep in the forests of Vietnam during the Vietnam War. All in all, prepare to go meta. The first member of that squad is Tug Speedman, played by Ben Stiller, who is supposed to play the captured soldier. Despite not playing a member of the actual Special Forces team, he's nonetheless sent to the wilderness with them to learn how to grow a pair, and above all, how to lead. Speedman is kitted with an AR-15 Sporter II carbine, also known as the AR-15A2 Sporter. Aside from Speedman using it throughout the movie, various other characters use it in the first scene they shoot. At first glance, this is about as era-accurate as labor laws and racial equality at an Alabama farm in the 1820s, as these carbines weren't used in the Vietnam War because they only started production after 1973. However, remember how I said that this movie makes fun of pretty much everything in Hollywood? It's possible that this gun was used on purpose as a nod to the movie Platoon, a serious movie about the Vietnam War in which Tom Berenger, Willem Dafoe, and Mark Moses all pack Colt Model 653 carbines, which is a very similar gun that also wasn't used in Vietnam, but somehow made it into production. The main difference between these guns is that Stiller's carbine has a 16-inch barrel, while the carbine used in Platoon has a 14.5-inch barrel. There are a few funny things I noticed about the gun in this movie. For one, it's later used by Robert Downey Jr. in a dual wield, and despite firing blanks, I think it's safe to assume it'd be incredibly difficult to dual wield AR-15s even with weaker recoil. Secondly, I noticed that Ben Stiller is left-handed as seen here, when he shoots blanks at a group of drug dealers who are, unbeknownst to him, firing live rounds at him. this may seem like a non-issue, but the ejection port on his gun is on the right side, meaning that the empty cartridges should fly towards him instead of flying away from him. The first iteration of the Sporter 2 did not have a brass deflector, which is this little thingy here, designed specifically to deflect casings. This is nothing major, but just a tiny inconvenience Stiller probably came across during filming. Thirdly, the amount of muzzle flash in this movie would make Michael Bay jealous, and I think that's another way the movie makes fun of Hollywood. Hollywood loves muzzle flash, and don't get me wrong, muzzle flash is a real thing, but it's not nearly as apparent or easy to see in daylight as Hollywood wants you to think. In fact, most professionals, soldiers, police officers, etc., use flash suppressors to hide their muzzle flash, as it would give away their position in real life. In Tropic Thunder, however, every shot is followed up by a muzzle flash, and I can't not love it. So, the most used gun in the movie is completely unrealistic for a Vietnam War film. The only real thing about it are the 20-round magazines everyone uses. But this was likely done on purpose. Unlike his era-inaccurate carbine, Tug Speedman is also seen carrying a dummy M67 hand grenade, which would be accurate as the movie is supposed to take place in 1969, and everyone knows that after Woodstock and the moon landing, the M67 replacing the M26 hand grenade is the most significant thing that happened that year. Once again, this movie makes fun of another dumb Hollywood tough guy trope as Speedman pulls out the pen with his teeth. In real life, you'd likely crack your teeth doing this, as the M67 pen is very difficult to pull out, a design placed on purpose in order to prevent soldiers from accidentally blowing themselves up. Tug is also seen with an M18 smoke grenade, but he never uses it. Moving on to Robert Downey Jr., who plays the stereotypical, over-the-top method actor Kirk Lazarus. Ironically, we mostly see him shoot the Sporter 2, even though that's not his primary firearm. Throughout the entire movie, Lazarus packs the Ithaca 37 shotgun. This 12-gauge shotgun was used in Vietnam, so it's era accurate. And it's the only pre-World War II shotgun still in production. In fact, it's the fourth most common shotgun in the world, with more than 2 million models produced, according to various sources. Lazarus fires the Model 37 3 times in the movie. Yes, I counted, and all of that during the initial Hot LZ scene. In spite of that, he packs enough shells to gun down the largest flock of turkeys in the world. While admiring his dedication to personifying the "a Boy Scout is always prepared" adage, notice his gun handling. Dear God, did I want to gouge my eyes out watching this? I know the gun is a prop, and I know the shells are filled with paper, but still, this is insultingly bad trigger discipline. The waving of the gun like it's a stick? It's the exact opposite of what the special operator he's supposed to portray would do. Unlike Lazarus, rapper Alpa Chino, yes, that's his actual name, and Kevin Sandusky show amazing trigger discipline with their XM16E1s. The XM16E1, also known as the M16A1, is essentially the same weapon as the M16, but with the addition of a forward assist and a rib in the side receiver designed to prevent the accidental release of the magazine. It was used in Vietnam, and in 1969, it officially replaced the M14 rifle to become the U.S. military's standard service rifle. And as I said before, Sandusky and Chino handled this gun very well in the movie. Note how the finger is always off the trigger unless they're shooting or getting ready to shoot. Even in this scene, in which they're carrying their weapons in a casual manner, you can see that Chino's finger is actually straight across the trigger. Kudos to them for that, because what you're seeing here is safe, trained, proper trigger discipline. Now, when the shooting actually starts, Chino holds his rifle below his armpit, and if it were firing real rounds, the recoil would kick the gun out of his hands. But since he's firing blanks and holding the rifle with both hands, I think the average person can manage the recoil in this position. Of course, the absolutely insane muzzle flash is present here as well. At one point in the movie, Chino's gangster persona comes out and he holds and fires his M16A1 sideways, which is laughably unrealistic, but it's great attention to detail from the actor playing Chino. And then afterwards, he kind of ruins it by dual wielding, but If you take a look at his left hand, he's gripping the gun by the hand guard, and that finger is nowhere near the trigger. Chino's good, but Sandusky's gun handling is even better. Take a look at this moment.
I go high, you go low.
Now, disregard Lazarus doing whatever the hell that breach is supposed to be. This is the way you're supposed to hold your gun when you're doing something else with your other hand. Keep your gun pointed at the target, in this case the door, while doing whatever you need to do with your other hand. The only mistake in this instance is the fact that he's opening the door from the wrong side, but I assume that happened because Lazarus is in his way.
You can read the map.
Yeah, I think so.
And I know Steven got everyone convinced we out here making Planet of the Apes on YouTube or some shit, but I don't buy it.
This is no coincidence. It's said twice in the movie that Sandusky is the only actor who went through the 2-week boot camp the production had set up for the cast, and he's the only one who actually read the script. In comparison, he's the only one whose behavior resembles that of a real soldier. The final squad member, and the antithesis of Sandusky in both character and combat capacity, is Jack Black's character Jeff Portnoy. Right off the bat, we learn that he's a drug addict with no self-control, and that shows in his scenes. On a side note, before we continue, I absolutely love Jack Black's gritty, tough guy voice in this movie.
Don't get dragged in this bullshit valley. First thing I'm doing is paying my $2 so I can watch Brooklyn Buster's cherry on a sweet little mama son dinky down Bootang.
This line is so beautifully ridiculous and all kinds of insulting, but Black just sells it. What he doesn't sell well is his gun handling. Portnoy packs an M60, which is a machine gun widely known for its use in the Vietnam War, but it's also widely known for weighing 23 pounds and packing a hell of a recoil. In the opening scene, we see Portnoy not only fire it standing up, but run while firing. You could argue that this is possible, and it probably is, but it's highly unlikely that you'd provide accurate fire cover. The second thing I noticed is that he fires his M60 in either short bursts or single shots, which is the literal opposite of the gun's intended purpose. Now, during the raid of the drug compound, Portnoy is well into his detoxification process as he hasn't had any cocaine in more than a day, and he goes into a frenzy in which he holds Tran, the boy ruler of a drug empire, hostage with a Colt M1911A1 as he tries to get a hold of some heroin. Portnoy's gun handling is surprisingly good here, which only goes to show that he can behave properly when getting high is at stake. During the Hot LZ scene in the beginning of the movie, we catch a glimpse of Lazarus no-scoping someone behind his back with an M1911. This is, obviously, just as realistic as expecting a politician to keep his word. But I assume this was done on purpose as a way of making fun of unrealistic gun handling in Hollywood.
Go get your guns! Get them to the chopper! I'll take care of these yahoos!
The final weapon used by the production crew is used by Four Leaf, the Coast Guard veteran pretending to be a Vietnam veteran with fake hooks. Yes, really, who finds an M9 flamethrower at the drug compound. This is actually possible because the M9 flamethrower was used in Vietnam. However, it's unlikely it'd be in a good enough state to actually be operable. As Four Leaf points out correctly, this production's pyrotechnician, Cody, played by Danny McBride, is actually a pyromaniac. He's supposed to be the explosive coordinator, stern and responsible, following guidelines and ensuring everyone stays safe. But in reality, he treats real explosives, like the C4 he uses, as props.
Oh, go! Let's go freaking get here! First that shit-kicking cock! That's my shit!
In the Hot LZ scene, we see him salivating at the idea of staging a napalm strike, which is, by the way, incredibly accurate. Later on, after he and Four Leaf are rescued from the drug compounds by the cast, he rigs the bridge to explode in classic Hollywood fashion, even though C4 doesn't create fire when exploding. His entire character is a personification of Hollywood's obsession with explosions and fire in war epics and action movies in general. I couldn't even tell you how many times I've seen a grenade or C4 blow up in fireballs, which is not how they work, or C4 being activated with a round from a gun, which is about as likely as actually meeting those hot MILFs near you. And Cody, the madman that he is the embodiment of senseless explosions in war movies that put spectacle before accuracy. Even though this movie, to a degree, sacrificed realism in order to make fun of Hollywood tropes, when it comes to the loadout of the drug trafficking jungle militia, they really did stick to their guns. Pun intended. In real life, drug cartels are armed to the teeth, and this Golden Triangle cartel is no different. If anything, Southeast Asia is a trade route for gun traffickers. And since, according to the UN, drug trafficking fuels gun trafficking, it's very realistic that the heroin plant workers would have enough guns to stage a coup d'etat of a smaller country. The guerrillas are armed with AKMS and AKMSU assault rifles as the most common weapons. These weapons are pretty easy to get on the black market, fairly cheap, and surprisingly reliable. The biggest difference between the two is the stock, which is underfolding on the AKMS and side folding with the AKMSU, as well as barrel length. However, given that they use the same rounds and keeping in mind their intended purpose for the drug traffickers, these two weapons are more or less interchangeable for them. As you might have assumed by now, both of these weapons are children, so to say, of the AK-47 family. Big Daddy Kalashnikov, probably the on-field greatest and most iconic assault rifle ever designed, doesn't actually make an appearance in the movie. He instead sends his firstborn, the AKM, which can be seen used by the North Vietnamese soldiers during the Hot LZ scene. This would be completely inaccurate, as the AKM didn't get to Vietnam until 1972, while the movie is supposed to take place in 1969. It would actually be more realistic if the soldiers used AK-47s, which they don't. Just like the AKMS and the AKMSU, there are plenty of SKS rifles, also known as Chinese Type 56 carbines, used by the guerrillas. The original SKS rifle is a Soviet firearm from 1945, but the Chinese Type 56 is a living embodiment of the "you can copy my homework, but don't make it too obvious" that made its way into Vietnam during the war. Later, Chinese rifles became infamous in Asia for their stock. The stocks were made from orange crate wood, and they were possibly the lowest quality wood ever used for any mass-produced firearm. Stocks rotting away in the humidity of Southeast Asia was a common phenomenon during the Vietnam War. So it's likely that the carbines used by guerrillas aren't Vietnam War remnants, but recently acquired weapons. The theory that the drug traffickers don't really rely on Vietnam War weapons is further strengthened by the appearance of several more modern weapons, including several M4A1 carbines, one with an ACOG scope, which is a bit ludicrous if you ask me, an M4A1 with a close-quarters battle receiver, which is, in my opinion, way too high-tech for drug traffickers in the middle of a jungle in South Asia, and, of course, the Heckler & Koch MP5A5, one of the most beloved close-quarters weapons in history, makes an appearance. Of course, no proper militia would be complete without a launcher, and the child leader of this militia, Tran, packs a Norinco Type 69 anti-tank launcher. He fires it twice, once taking out the truck as the crew escapes, and he tries taking out the helicopter with the second shot. But Matthew McConaughey, the most dedicated talent agent in movie history, pulls up in the most clutch moment in the movie and deflects the 85mm warhead. Just like the Type 56 carbine, the Type 69 launcher is a copy of a Soviet weapon, specifically the RPG-7, possibly the most famous rocket launcher in history. There are two inaccuracies in this scene. First of all, the men standing behind Tran in this scene should be in for a surprise when he fires, as their clothes should catch fire. But it never happens, which is unrealistic. Secondly, note the sights on the launcher. That abomination doesn't exist in real life. I think the armorers wanted viewers to understand that he's using anti-aircraft sights, so they installed the most well-known anti-aircraft sights on the RPG, which are usually used on machine guns. This is what the sights on Soviet launchers look like in real life, and the Chinese copies aren't any different. The most interesting thing about this entire part of the movie is how quickly the actors make the switch from pretend soldiers to regular civilians caught in a battlefield. Aside from Tug Speedman, still desperate to prove himself as a leader, everyone else is scared out of their minds, and they just want to get the hell away from the compound when the rounds start flying. And that is, perhaps, the most realistic thing about the movie, and the realest message the movie sends. Not only is Hollywood not real, the actors that make the action and war movies are not real badasses, except for Keanu Reeves, Chuck Norris, Sir Christopher Lee, and a handful of others. For the most part, it's all smoke and mirrors. And this movie takes it a step further as it makes fun of the fake war story stereotype. As Forley fesses up that the book he wrote about his time as a prisoner of war in Vietnam and his alleged rescue is completely fake, admitting that he was actually a member of the Coast Guard who never came close to Vietnam. And precisely because of meta-commentary such like that, this movie is a difficult one to rate for realism. The loadouts of all main cast members are realistic, except for that of Tug Speedman, but as I said before, his era-inaccurate gun is most likely there on purpose. The movie also pulls a fast one on us, as we see Tug pulling the pin on the era-accurate M67 hand grenade with his teeth. It's like the movie is trying to tell us, we know which weapons they used in Vietnam, but we'll misuse them on purpose to stick it to Hollywood. The reason this makes it so difficult to rate for realism is that I don't know when the movie is being satirical and when the gun handling is actually incompetent. Therefore, I'll give the movie a solid 7 out of 10. Most of the weaponry is era-accurate for both the Vietnam War and for modern drug traffickers. But I have to take a few points off for the gun handling by RDJ, Ben Stiller, Stiller's AR-15 Sporter II Combine, the unrealistic explosions, and that ridiculous anti-aircraft sight on the Type 69. However, I want you to put a huge asterisk next to that rating in your mind, because it's more than plausible that all those sins were committed on purpose. Truth be told, Tropic Thunder gets more things right than it does wrong. Aside from the firearms themselves, the gear looks like Vietnam War accurate military uniform. And as for the handling, Kevin Sandusky rules, and Al Pacino isn't too bad either. However, the focus on being meta, which is what this movie is all about, goes both ways. I used it to pardon a few obvious faults, and I can't not think about it as an explanation for a few obvious strengths of this movie. Sandusky is the only character handling his weapons properly because he's the only one who went to boot camp, while it's heavily implied that Al Pacino has a criminal background, at least to an extent, which also becomes apparent with his gun handling. But let's put all this meta stuff aside. The one thing the movie absolutely gets right is the natural reaction to all hell breaking loose. When the shooting starts at the drug plant, all of these spoiled Hollywood actors realize it's time to get the hell out, and their reaction is completely natural. They start panicking, they're confused, and it takes them a while to find their way to the helicopter. At that point, they all stop acting and they start doing what any human being would do in that scenario and start running. A dude playing a dude disguised as another dude. That's what RDJ said in the movie, whose crew is pretending to film a movie while disguising itself as a fake war movie. There are a lot of things I love in life. Meta, humor, and guns both make the list, so it was only natural I'd love this movie. The way this movie used wrong guns and non-existent maneuvers as a medium for the right commentary of very real mistakes in modern filmmaking And Hollywood as an industry is mwah, chef's kiss. From over-the-top explosions that make fun of literally every action movie from the late 80s onwards, to ridiculous one-handed gun handling, cheesy military dialogue,
Get your deep draw jukebox, Jerry curl ass, and this chicken chip chop chop. ASAP. Police is still outside the perimeter, son. Let's live with that cracker jump shot. We did it now. We did it now.
unnecessarily dramatic main character gestures, and all up to my favorite war movie stereotype of all time, the tell my mom I love her chest-to-chest moment between two guys in the middle of a war-torn battlefield. Tropic Thunder has it all. It takes every single unrealistic detail you'll find in war movies, the things that make actual service members cringe in disbelief, and it turns those dumb moments on its own head. I haven't exactly done a poll, but I have a feeling that military and ex-military guys and girls love this movie precisely for this. I think that was actually the point in the movie, and in its own way, the movie is paying its respects to real servicemen and women. Ben Stiller, who plays Tug Speedman and has written and directed the movie, said that the idea for this movie stems from his experience while shooting Empire of the Sun. Without naming any names, he said that some actors became self-important and self-involved, believing they were part of a real military unit after taking part in boot camps to prepare for war film roles. When you take that into context, we begin to understand that the sole purpose of this movie was making fun, not just of common Hollywood mistakes, but of people who partake in those productions and forget that real stories of war heroism require real courage and often come at great personal costs, which Hollywood likes to romanticize and, unfortunately, forget. Well, did you like Tropic Thunder? Do you think that the movie mistakes were there on purpose or that they're a genuinely bad production? I'm a fan of the first theory, but let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more videos.